Here are a few handy tools to make this job easier. A food mill for taking off the skins and seeds of the tomatoes. The scale for measuring out tomatoes. And a stick blender, so you don't have to transfer your tomatoes into a blender and then back again. So you don't have to have any of these tools, but they're all very handy. The ingredients for ketchup are about 6 pounds of fresh whole tomatoes, 1½ cups of white vinegar, 1 bay leaf, about a cup of onion, 4 cloves of garlic, 2 teaspoons of salt, a teaspoon of black pepper, about 1/8 teaspoon of paprika, and 1 cup of honey. Of course, the best way to make anything on this diet is to start from absolute scratch. That's why I chose to start from fresh whole tomatoes. However, if you can find legal tomato juice and you're inclined that way, you can substitute 2 46-ounce cans for the 6 pounds of fresh whole tomatoes. I'm going to begin by coring and halving my tomatoes and putting them in my pot. Since I've got a food mill, I'm going to let the food mill take care of the skins for me later. If you don't have a food mill, you can use the slip method with hot boiling water and cold water. Check out that other video. You insert your knife at an angle and work the tomato around. If your knife is dull and you're having a problem cutting it, I suggest using a serrated blade. That should help you out. If there are any bad spots on your tomato, you can just cut them out too. I guess it goes without saying that you should be careful with your knives. Notice I turn it over when I get to halfway so I can at least cut away from my body for the second half. Now we just set them over the burner on about medium-high heat, or high heat to start with. You can hear them heating up now, so I'm gonna squish them down a bit, squish these buggers, so we don't get burned on the bottom. That's one thing you got to be concerned about through this whole process. It's not burning, because once you burn it, it really screws up the taste. You'd be lucky if you can get someone to eat it after you burn it. So, beware of that. You hear how the sound has changed? And so I want this to cook for a while. I'm going to leave the lid on for now. Later on we're going to leave the lid off because we want the moisture to leave our tomatoes so it thickens and becomes the consistency of ketchup. But for right now, I want to cook it for a short while just so I can get the seeds and the skins off using our food mill. So we'll do this just for say 5-10 minutes till it gets all heated through really nice. Let's give it a little stir. Yep, that's coming along nicely. Alright, well those look like they're ready to go. Let's run them through the food mill. So now we'll transfer our partially cooked tomatoes into the food mill. It took me a while to find one of these gizmos, but I've discovered that if you go to a farm supply store, that they tend to have a lot of food preparation, food canning sort of goods. So if you're having trouble, you might want to go there. You might want to go there first. Alright, let's give it a whirl. Reverse once in a while. Alright, we'll call that good. Now essentially what we're left with is more or less a tomato sort of juice, which we'll add our other ingredients to. Alright, to our processed tomatoes we'll add 1½ cups of white vinegar, 1 bay leaf, and we'll add our 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and 1/8 teaspoon of paprika. We also need to add about a cup of onion, And we don't need to cut this onion up small, just small enough that it'll help its flavor get through while it's cooking. I'm going to break it up to help that happen some more too. Okay, we also need 4 cloves of garlic. And we'll give them a good smash. Put them in. Oops, a little bit of paper yet. Now if you've been following the ingredients, you've noticed I haven't put the honey in yet. That's because we don't want it to burn. We're going to put that in at the very last part. If you leave it in there, you increase your risk of burning. So we're not going to do that. So now let's put this back on the stove to begin with on high heat. We're going to leave it uncovered now because at this point we want to get rid of as much moisture as possible because that's what will give us our ketchup-like consistency. So, no lid. It's going to take quite a while to get this down to the right consistency. Be sure and check it once in a while and give it a little stir. In the beginning you can use a very high heat when there's a lot of liquid in there. This will help you get out the liquid more quickly at this high heat. But as it thickens, you're going to need to turn it down a little bit lower and a little bit lower and a little bit lower so that you don't burn it. If you've got a big enough pot, you can certainly double this recipe. Of course, it'll take a lot longer for it to reduce down to the ketchup state, but you could put it in jars and can it and stick it in your pantry. It'll last a very long time. I suggest if you want a can that you pick up the Ball Blue book. I found mine in the grocery store next to the canning supplies. It's a soft cover, it can't be very expensive, or maybe you can get one at your local library. Either way, I think once your ketchup is done, it's about a 15-minute hot water bath. So it doesn't take too long to actually preserve the ketchup. Alright, it looks like the volume has been reduced by about half. You can see it's starting to thicken. There we go, you're getting a better idea. So since it's getting thicker, I'm going to reduce the heat to about medium, down from high. And we'll let it sit here for a while. Oh yeah, that's looking pretty thick, so we'll move on. The next step is to find that bay leaf and take it out. Now we'll use our stick blender to puree it. If you don't have a stick blender, you can always transfer this into a regular blender and puree it and then put it back in the pot. For our final ingredient, the honey. Now we'll mix that back up and we'll bring our heat back up again. Now that the honey has been added, you need to pay even closer attention as it will burn more easily. Well, it's thick like ketchup. Let's give it a taste test. Ketchup-y. For this quantity of ketchup, I'm not going to preserve it by canning. I'll just put it in my fridge. But I do like to use canning jars. And here's another handy tool. I call it a canning funnel. I don't know what the proper term is, but it's handy for getting it into the jar. Now I'll set this on my counter until it cools, and once it's cooled, I'll put it in the fridge. So there you have 6 pounds of fresh tomato goodness compacted into 1 quart jar. Happy eating.